Welcome to a new podcast series called I'm Dying to Tell You. My name is Dr. Mark Goulston, and I'm Dying to Tell You is kind of autobiographical because I am dying to tell you. I probably won't be dying soon, but I'm going to be dying much sooner than I thought I would. And what each day is revealing to me is profound. It's something I never realized. And I want to share that with you. And if that sounds like a downer, I understand, because to be honest, I wouldn't have listened to me 5 years ago. But I feel compelled to share what I'm discovering because the universe won't let me alone. I wake up at 3:30 in the morning and I write down 5 episodes. And so I need to get them out because one of these days at 3:30 in the morning, I'm not going to wake up. And on this first episode, I'm calling this Michelangelo dying. Michelangelo dying. What the heck is that about? Well, Michelangelo is reported as saying, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set it free. I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set it free. So I hope you'll sit through this unedited first take. Thank you, Clint Eastwood. Raw episode. And I'm going to leave the suspense for what is Michelangelo dying till the end. So I hope I keep you interested. Years ago, I used to do house calls to dying patients. I was kind of a death and dying specialist. I focused on suicide prevention. And one of my mentors was one of the experts in that area. And he would refer me these people and I'd go do house calls with them. And part of my goal was to help them find peace if they weren't able to at the end of their life. And I remember one such person, I can't mention his name, but everybody knows who he was. He was beloved universally. Powerful, rich, handsome. And I remember, and he liked that I could be direct with him. And I visited him one day and I say, you look like crap. And I don't think it's because you're dying. You've been dying as long as I've known you. He kind of liked that I could be direct with him when everybody was afraid to. And I'd say, what's up? And he looked at me, he says, I don't think I've ever done anything important in my life. I said, what, are you crazy? You got a hospital named after you? You got fans, the world loves you. His personal life was, a little bit different than that. And he looked at me with this wry smile and sense of humor that he was known for. And he said, don't con a con man, especially when he's dying. I've got all the love that money can buy. And that's all it's worth. And I said, so, okay, I get that. So what's eating you up? And he looked at me and he said, everything I thought was important isn't. And everything I thought that was important, see, this is raw. I'm not going to edit. Everything I thought was important isn't, and everything I thought wasn't important is, and I don't have time to fix it, and I don't like not having time. And I told him, I said, look, drop it. Doctor's orders. Give it a break. You did great in your life. Yeah, maybe your personal life could have been different, but drop it. Let it go. Doctor's orders. And don't be a pain in the rear to the people around you. And he looked at me and he said, good advice. He said, forget the good advice. Follow it. And I think he was able to do that. But that stuck with me. Because when you're doing house calls to dying patients, they sometimes tell you stuff that you're an idiot if you don't remember it. And that's what I said to myself when I left him. Mark, you're an idiot if you don't remember this. Then there was another story, and this involved my dad. My dad was a workaholic, and he was such a workaholic that he really didn't connect with us. Not that unusual for a hardworking depression age person. And he could be a little bit negative. He could be a little bit critical. I think he had good intentions, but my brothers and I were not as close to him as we might have been. And he retired. It wasn't the happiest retirement. And he developed Alzheimer's. And I remember realizing that I wasn't going to get that chunk of wisdom from him. I wasn't going to get that approval because he was not all there. And I remember he dies from a stroke. And I had just visited him the week before in Florida, and then I fly back. And I remember he's in the coffin. It's an open coffin to the family. And he had a stroke, and they embalmed him, and his face was kind of rubbery, and his face was a little bit twisted. And I remember leaning over, and I kissed him on the forehead. And then in a voice as loud and as clear as my voice is to you right now, I heard him say, "Don't treat a big thing like a small thing, and don't treat a small thing like a big thing. Don't do what I did." So I got my little chunk of wisdom, tucked that away. And I'll share another story. I'll just squeeze this one in. I used to do cardiograms at the Jewish Home for the Aged in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts. And I remember one day I went there, and there was a fellow, we'll call him Mr. Cohen. And he was spry, and he was filled with all kinds of energy. And everybody else was in wheelchairs in the halls. They're leaned over, they're drooling. They kind of looked like they were waiting to die, and he was just filled with energy. And I go in there to do the cardiogram, and I said, "I got to ask you, what are you doing here?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Maybe I'm young, and it's a little depressing. What are you doing here?" And then he looked at me and he said, "Pull up a chair." So I pulled up a chair, and then he looked at me and he said, "A couple floors from where we are is my wife of 67 years. We escaped the Russian Revolution together. She saved my life. I saved her life. We had a little tailor shop. I'm just fine. My children want to visit. I say, visit when you want to. You don't have to, because I'm very happy here." And I said, "Well, how can you be happy?" And he said, "Well, a bunch of years ago, my wife had a stroke, bad stroke. And she's on that floor where people in her condition are. And every day I wake up, I get dressed up, I comb my hair, and I go to her room and I bathe her. I braid her hair the way it was when we first met many years ago. Sometimes I think she recognizes me, but, it's probably just wishful thinking. And I braid her hair, I bathe her, I change her diaper. And then I sit next to her and I read my Jewish newspaper. And I said, "That sounds kind of depressing. You could come and visit her. Like you said, she may not even know you're here." And he looked at me and he said, "I like being here." And I'm still looking like, okay. And then he looked at me and he said, "You don't seem to get it. I get to give my wife dignity." And he wasn't crying when he said that. But I'm crying now because of how meaningful that was. And I wasn't crying then. And he looked at me and he said, maybe someday you'll get it. And Mr. Cohen, I get it. So getting back to what the heck is Michelangelo dying? Well, if you know anything about Michelangelo, there's a famous quote that is attributed to him where he said, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set it free. I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set it free. And how that applies to me, and this is the first important lesson, and I'll try and give a lesson in each of these episodes that I hope will help you. When I learned of my prognosis, and I had a long-standing, well, a couple of years of something called lymphoma, but that was just doing okay. And then it turns out I've developed something else called MDS, myelodysplastic syndrome. And that's going to move into leukemia in the not too distant future. Not too distant as in 5 months, maybe 5 years, median 1.8 years. And I'm okay with it. And I'll keep you posted because it's looking like the only approach is something called a bone marrow transplant. And I'm up for it. But if it doesn't work out, I'm okay with palliation, hospice, pain control. But what does Michelangelo dying have to do with any of this? I think the greatest realization that I've had since this has happened is I have realized what's important to me. And the way I've realized it is I have realized what is unimportant. It's huge. All the stuff that's not important in my life, in your life, it is huge. And so I have lopped it off. I've eliminated it. Bye-bye, not important. And what's important is radiant. I see it so clearly. And I'm just sharing this with you because, as I said 5 years ago, I wouldn't have listened to this. But I wished I'd had. And what I ask you is to take a moment, and if you sort of know what's important and you want to get a good view of it, recognize what's not important. Do a 360 of your life. Do a house cleaning. And then when you discover what's important, as I've discovered, make sure you live it as if every day is a gift. So thanks for tuning in. I look forward to joining you at a future episode. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these, but I have a feeling they're going to show up somewhere. So until next time, take care and don't wait till you're dying before you know what's important.